And I see the man. I don't see it. The man want
Hello everyone, Stevie here. How's it going? Let me turn that down a little bit. Something a little bit different to start the show off today. It's some Bongra, Dub Murderer. You can find this on Bandcamp. If you like it, I would say go and get it. It's quite a nice song. Loads of dubby, echoey. But anyway, I digress, because this is not a music podcast. This is the Stevie... Why have I not got a name for this yet? This is just the ABZ Podcast, right? That's it. From now on, this is the ABZ Podcast with me, Stevie from ABZ, the kid from Aberdeen, the working class, falling off my seat, the working class political commentator who likes to swear every so often. I'm here. You're catching me obviously on iTunes, iHeartRadio, or worldoftrash.libsync.com. I am also live on the Periscope as we're recording this show. So in the future, if you want to come and view a show being recorded live on a camera on the internet for free, catch me on Twitter at Stevie C. Smith. You will find my Periscope and everything from there. I'm also quite active on the old Twitter. Where else can you find me? I'm also on Facebook. Just look for Stevie ABZ. It's there. I'm trying to build the page. And of course, if you want to help support my humble little podcast, you can support me by going to Patreon and doing something there. I don't know what, because I've not really set it up yet, because it's low on priorities. Or you can go to my Redbubble shop, buy a few political stickers, maybe buy a few other stickers, maybe buy a t-shirt. Even like 2 stickers a week, and that's the podcast sorted. It's that cool. But this is not about selling stickers or shilling my Patreon. This week, well, I say this week, this is the second podcast this week. Today, I should say, I am going to ask the question: was Scotland missold on its pretense of remaining in the UK? Good question, hey? So, I mean, this is a topic, right? It means something to me because I'm Scottish and I want to stay in the EU. And made a mistake. Catch your ass podcast. It's there. It's all there. Anyway, yeah. I'm Scottish. I want to stay in the EU. And I've always thought that what happened with the Scottish referendum was a bit funny. And now, the funniness that we experienced is just coming to the front more. So this all got me asking the question, were we missold on the yes-no vote? Like, if we cast our minds back, we were sold a promise, basically. That's the way I see it. We were sold a concept. We were sold an idea. We were sold an ideology from Westminster, from David Cameron's government. The pig lover, David Cameron himself. Of course, remember, never forget, Brexit is David Cameron's fault, no one else. It's no one else's fault. David Cameron is Mr. Brexit. But then, sub the Periscope. I'm not going to read that one out, but yeah. We're going straight in with the classy comments this week. And this is the type of stuff that distracts me. I'll stay on track. But yeah, then, David Cameron, did he fill our heads with crap when it came to, and I mean, we, as in Scotland's heads, with crap, with the Scottish in-out referendum? Because in that referendum, Scotland had a choice, right? We could stay in the UK, or we could leave the UK. It was that simple. And to make us vote no to leaving the UK, I don't know why it wasn't just remain or leave like the Brexit one, but I digress. I really, really hate referendums now. But yeah, the government made promises. Westminster made a lot of promises. Now I'm double tasking here. I'm trying to load the images up here that I took yesterday. I will find them. So yeah, Westminster made promises, and now a few years later, it seems like these promises are full of crap because, well, Scotland's being dragged out of the EU. We are being taken out of the EU, and we don't really want it. So yeah, I have been asking the question over the last few days, was this right? A question just popped up on the live Periscope, by the way. Would I vote independence to stay in the EU? No, yes, totally. 100%. So in this podcast, I'm going to try and stay on track. In this podcast today, I'm going to ask a few questions, and we're going to have a little look at the Scottish referendum, and we're going to link the Scottish referendum to the EU referendum, and we're going to have a little look at it. We're going to have a little look at the advertising, the promises, the rhetoric, the ideology. Well, maybe not the rhetoric and ideology, but we're going into it a little bit anyway. But we're going to have a little look at this whole situation. And I'm going to have a little look and see if Scotland really does have a mandate for a second referendum, or hey, can Scotland even just stay in the EU because promises were made? But I thought the best way of doing this was to just devise a list of questions, and then I'm going to go down the questions, then we're going to look at some other stuff and cross-reference the questions with some things on the government's website, some documents, some promises, and we'll see if we were missold on remaining in the UK. That simple. So question number 1 on my list of questions. Did David Cameron... This is the first question I asked myself, because this is one I wanted answers to. I wasn't sure if this was like the Mandela effect, or if this did actually happen. So I had to ask the question. Did David Cameron go back on his word? Did David Cameron say Scotland would not be dragged out of the EU kicking and screaming? So I had a look. Of course, I went straight to Google for this one. Typed in Google, there's some keyboard noises. Did David Cameron say this? And I looked for it, and I really looked for David Cameron saying the line about Scotland being dragged out of the EU. Now, the fact is, David Cameron didn't actually say that. He did not say that Scotland would be dragged out of the EU. It turns out it was Nicola Sturgeon who actually said that, not David Cameron. So, in that respect, David Cameron didn't go back on his word about dragging Scotland out of the EU, because he never said that. That's why I'm saying it's a bit Mandela effecty. How did we... I thought that Cameron said that, so I mean, I was wrong. And I think a lot of people are wrong. So a lot of people believe that it was Cameron that said this, but it wasn't. It was actually Sturgeon. But regardless of what it said there, yes, David Cameron did go back on his words. And we're going to prove that on the second question, because the second question is, what promises were made to Scotland to make us say no to independence? So what promises were made? Obviously it was a referendum. There was a yes side and a no side. There was people politicking for yes, an independent Scotland, and there was people politicking for no, a non-independent Scotland. Westminster, UK government, and that was David Cameron's government at the time, were obviously politicking for Scotland to remain in the UK. So what promises were made? This is something that I felt was really important to this. So, but rather than looking through the whole document, because we could go right into the document and we could rip it apart, because it is a massive document. But I didn't think we actually needed to do that, because there's quite a few parts in it that were pretty open shut. It was quite easy. So Where did I get these? Where did I get the answers? Where did I go and find the promises that Westminster made in the Scottish referendum? I went to the government's websites, of course, because everything that happened here it's on paper, you know what I mean? It's all on paper. So, there's a great document on the government's website. It's on gov.uk, of course. The best way to search it is for Scottish Independence Referendum, Our Place in the World. Now, this is part of the UK government's promises, their pledges, their view into the future on what Scotland should have been thinking when they voted yes or no back in 2015. Was it 2015? Man, it feels like it was only a week ago. But anyway, one of the first things. So the reason I say Our Place in the World as the part of the document to read is that it really is just the most relevant. It is as simple as that. Our place in the world includes us being a part of the EU. So I had a little look at this document. So I've posted a few of these on my Twitter as well if you want to go and see. So they're all available to view. So the first bit I came to, very top of this page, well, the second paragraph, it is titled, Scotland has a strong place in the world as part of the UK. Let me read this out. I'll try and read this verbatim. As the United Kingdom, we have strength in numbers and a long-standing international reputation. We are the 6th biggest economy in the world, a major military force and a member of the EU on our own terms with our own currency. We can help others on the issues we care about. For example, helping over 1 million people get food, medical care and shelter. Our interests are protected through a global network and our long-standing diplomatic relationships give us advantages in our dealings with other countries. Our strong financial track record makes it easier for us to borrow. No one knows exactly how effective an independent Scotland's international presence would be. What we do know is that the relationships we have in place, aka Europe, our armed forces and the diplomatic services, global network and reputation work well. And then below that, we've got a bit titled, Our Influences. I'll read this as well. Being involved when important decisions are made on the economy, security and human rights means we can defend our interests and get a good deal for everyone in the UK. We are a member of the most influential global organisations including the G7, G8, G20, NATO, the UN and the EU. The EU. This means that people in Scotland are represented at the highest levels when it comes to major economic, political and securities. It goes on. So that was just one part of it. So that was one part of the promise that really, really hits home. It really, really makes... Cheers, dude. That was a lovely message just come up there on Twitter, on the Periscope. F Scotland. Hey, we've heard worse. So yeah, as I was reading down this document, it's still on the page, Our Place in the World, because I felt that this is the most important bit. We come to a part called Our Voice Matters. By the way, if you're watching this, give us a retweet, hashtag FBPE, get people involved, hashtag IndieRef2, hashtag, you know the deal. This is to the I'm shouting it down the microphone, but this is to the people on Periscope. So yeah, the next part of Our Place in the World document to prove that David Cameron did go back in his world and to prove what promises were made. The UK has a strong international... Sorry, I will start that again. The UK has a strong say in international decisions that that affect everyone in the UK. For instance, those made by the EU on farming, fishing, finance. Scotland can trade easily with other parts of the UK, and thanks to our EU membership with countries in the EU, no one knows how long it might take an independent Scotland to join the EU. especially if Scotland tries to negotiate its own versions of special membership terms and opt-outs that the UK currently has. This could make trading and existing EU countries, including the continuing UK, more difficult. Right there, black and white. This is ridiculous, right? This page alone proves that David Cameron was full of crap and that his promises were broken. 2 promises there. This is our place in the world. This is in the promises that was made to Scotland from government as part of the Indie referendum. This clearly shows that the main selling point for the Scottish referendum was the EU. That's not even like it's not even like a byline, it's not even something. This is a constant recurring theme in this document. It always goes back to the EU membership. EU membership, EU membership, EU membership. Every single time. So I mean, question number 3 here. I'm not really sure why I've got that, but it says, were said promises broken? Yes, 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 yes. To everyone watching, by the way, I'm getting loads of comments coming up. What I'll do is, I'll have a break after the next question. I'll take some questions, and we'll see what's happening. You just can say whatever you want, and you can ask me about haggis and all sorts of crazy fun stuff. Because yeah, I love questions about haggis. Welcome to the chat, people. So, were our promises broken? Yes. How were our promises broken? I mean, it just blows me away if I can't read my own notes. Yes. So, the next question I've got here is, were we missold staying in the UK? Yes. Again, yes. Now, let's break this down because I want to actually go in deeper on this exact part of it. The mis-selling part. Because at the end of the day, we were lied to and we were missold. Now, I'm going to just put a little thing out here, right? Let's say you buy a car where the main feature of that car is that you get an engine with the car. You know, so your car actually works. That's a feature in this car. You're promised this from day one. The car will have an engine. It will have a strong engine. Without this engine, you won't be able to speak to other people. This engine will help you with trade. So you buy the car. You're like, freaking hell yeah, I need a car. I need a car, with, especially a car with an engine, because I need to be able to drive around. That's important. A year later, someone from government comes in, or the car factory, and they take your engine away. And you're like, what the hell are you playing at? What are you doing with my engine? They're like, oh, sorry, then we've changed terms. We're taking your engine away now. That wouldn't happen. That would get taken to court. That would be mis-selling. That's dishonest. It's false advertising. False advertising. See, I was a way to start ranting there. I've stopped myself. Now, how can I prove that this is like mis-selling or bad advertising? Well, I thought, let's cross-reference this with things you would buy in shops. So, if you were to buy a service or an item from a shop, what protection would you have there? Because at the end of the day, we were sold something in this election, and it's turned out not to be what we expected. So I looked online. The first thing I seen was the Sales of Goods Act 1979. Now this covers all parts of the UK. I'm not going to go into the Sales of Goods Act 1979. If you want to, there will be a link with this podcast, or you can just Google it. It's there, and it's a really mad, big, long, boring document. So if you want, I'll abridge it. It comes down to, well, in my opinion, there's 4 parts of the Sales of Goods Act that I picked. Okay, number 1. The seller has to be honest. Okay? There has to be honesty behind the sale and what's going into the item. The item you're selling has to be fit for purpose. So it has to work. The item has to match expectations. So, as I said before with the car, if you buy a car where one of the main features is an engine, and that is expected of it, then that engine should always be there. That's the expectation. So the car's always got to match that expectation, else something's went wrong and it goes against the Sales of Goods Act. And lastly, with the Sales of Goods Act, although it doesn't really count here because it's not a good per se, is that it's a contract. When you make a sale, a contract is made. So you're making a contract when you buy a service or an item or anything, whenever you buy anything, you might not know this, but you make a contract. Whenever you sell anything, a contract is made between you, shaking hands for Periscope, and the people that you're trading with, right? So that's 4 points from the Sales of Goods Act. 4 points that show that Scotland was being missold in regard of staying within the UK in regard to the independence referendum back in 2015. That's pretty cut and dry, yeah. I mean, it really is that simple. It took me about 10 minutes to actually find this stuff out. But then I thought, it's like, well, is it a good? I mean, is a political campaign, a political promise, does that count as a good or a service or something? Did we make a contract with the government for them to provide us that service? I don't know. It maybe doesn't count as a sale because it's not a good, but what they did was advertising. Now this is important. Now this is something I am going to look into more. I am not a lawyer. I'm just a media student / media person / amateur documentaire / podcaster. So I don't know the legal ins and outs, and I'll have to look more into this. But once I realised that, well, it maybe doesn't come under the Sales of Goods Act, I was like, is there anything else that maybe covers this in government, in law, that shows that the UK government has not acted right in regard to the Scottish referendum? So I had a little think about it, and I was like, of course, marketing and advertising guidelines, yay! So I went back to the government's website, and I found the government's marketing and advertising guidelines. So there is a page on gov.uk called Marketing and Advertising, the Law. Now, of course, this is the abridged / overview version of the government's marketing and advertising guidelines. So this is what the government say is like the benchmark for good behaviour and how things should happen in regard to marketing and advertising. And hey, what is an election / referendum? What is all the stuff that goes into advertising for that? It is advertising. It is marketing and advertising. So if you're making promises so people make a choice in a referendum or an election, you're advertising. That is covered. That I'm pretty sure that the advertising for an election is still advertising and still should be covered by advertising law. So I had a little look. The marketing and advertising guidelines from the .gov UK site. Again, I'm going to abridge this because I'm not going to read the whole document for you. But in short, like before, I've picked 4 bullet points from the advertising and marketing guidelines that I can cross-reference with the Scottish referendum. So, your advertising must have an accurate description. Straight off the bat, we were not given an accurate description for Scotland staying in the UK because the description clearly changed and they clearly knew that it could change. So that's not right. It has to be decent. Well, that's questionable. It's an election, so is any advertising in an election ever decent? Because it's never is. It always gets really dirty and mean, and a lot of the times it just causes more division than creates unity. So I don't think it was decent. Truthful / honest. Now, I don't know why they've got truthful and honest. It's kind of maybe just a symbol. It is a Tory government that wrote this. A redundant word or two would not surprise me, because half of their government at the moment is redundant. But yeah, truthful and honest. Your marketing and advertising campaigns have to be truthful and honest. Now, clearly it wasn't truthful and honest because they knew that in the future, no, I'm on record. I checked this back in 2015, the week the Scottish referendum, after the Scottish referendum and after the first election where Miliband lost. I predicted that this was all going to happen. I knew this was going to happen. I knew that the UK would end up voting to leave the EU, and Scotland had already kind of been promised that we would never be taken out of the EU. I knew this would happen. And I knew that just from what was being said then. So I'm going to just go out on a limb and say, no, it wasn't honest and truthful, because it could have been, the holes were able to be blown in the campaign then, and they made things that have not came, only a year and a bit later, nearly 2 years later, the terms have changed. Like I say in the example I made before with the car engine. If someone came and take the engine out of your car because, hey, sorry, we didn't foresee the future, you wouldn't accept that. That would be straight to court, and the people would be giving you your engine back and paying you extra. But no, the government seem to think they could just come in and take our engines away. It's ridiculous. Last bullet point. Social responsibility. Our marketing and advertising campaigns should be socially responsible. But guess what? UK government totally lied. Shock, UK government lied. They lied in the Scottish EU referendum. And this is just mental. We have a situation now where 51% or 52%, can't remember the number exactly, of Scottish people voted for Scotland to remain in the UK because of the main selling point being that we would remain in the EU, only for that to be changed a year and a bit later. Which brings me to my last question, and the final question. Does this breach advertising rules? Yes. I am sure that what happened in that election now, in retrospect, has broken advertising and marketing guidelines. And, from all this, there is no way that anyone can argue Nicola Sturgeon's point and the SNP's point, or anyone's point, that Scotland just deserved a second referendum. After you go through this, look at the Sales of Goods Act, right? It's hard to define a referendum as a good. But, let's look at the referendum. If we try and make the referendum into a physical being, we can use the promises, the website. That's the wrapper for it. That's the cover. That's the bit that wrapped and enclosed the referendum. So we could say that its packaging was wrong. The packaging of the EU referendum was wrong. It was a lie. It was, and then we get into the advertising and marketing, and it's like, well, yeah, they clearly should have known that Brexit could happen, yet they made a hell of a lot of promises in our Scottish referendum that heavily implied Scotland needs to stay in the EU, and that staying with the UK will keep Scotland in the EU, only for now to happen, where Theresa May, Theresa, David Davis, and all the rest of our idiot cronies are trying to rip us directly out of the UK. So yeah, that was it. That's my rant. I only wanted to do 15 minutes. How long have we went? We've gone half an hour with this. Half an hour. But yeah. And I hope this clarifies. If anyone's been thinking about this, as I say, I'm no expert, right? I am still learning about politics. I'm in uni just now. So, I've done media for 10, 15 years. I'm just trying to get my ticket now. But I'm actually learning politics and how to talk better about politics and debate politics and that sort of stuff. And this is a question that just really, really, really interested me. And it just seemed unfair. And almost every week we hear someone raising the question or raising the point that Nicola Sturgeon wants to have a second referendum, and the whole question of does Scotland have a mandate for a second referendum. After we look at this, when we go back and look at the promises made by UK government, and as I said, we've cross-referenced the promises by government with the Sales of Goods Act and the Marketing and Advertising Guidelines, we were missold. So yeah, hell yeah, it's in black and white. Like, categorically, Scotland, I wouldn't even say that Scotland needs a second referendum. I would say that because of the wording and the promises in the first referendum and how hard UK government's gone back on their word completely, I think Scotland should just, I mean, if we can stay in the UK and in the EU, that would be the better option, which, to be honest, it's going to happen with Ireland, because Ireland cannot be taken out of the EU, right? That cannot happen. Northern Ireland has to be in the EU, or the Good Friday Agreement's bust. Now, I think Scotland have a excellent case for exactly the same thing, because if they don't give us EU membership, then why did people vote to remain in the UK? Either way, half the country is getting screwed over. So that's me. That is my rant done for the day. If you want to catch me, if you want to talk more about this, you can. I'm going to be on Periscope for a little bit after the show anyway, for the Periscopers watching, so hang about. But yeah, you can follow me on Twitter and Facebook at Stevie ABZ. If you want to support this podcast, support my videos and documentaries, you can find me on Patreon. It's patreon.com/Stevie ABZ. I've got no special offers, or I've got none of that gimmicks yet. I don't really know what I'm doing with Patreon. So yeah, if you want to help the podcast, if you're feeling generous, go nuts. But if you'd rather not be so generous but have an item in your hand, you can go to my Redbubble store. I've got t-shirts and stickers for sale there. Even a couple of stickers a month helps the show. So go nuts, people. If you want to email me at the podcast for feedback on this, podcasts@worldoftrash.co.uk, and you can find everything, loads more podcasts with myself and the archives at worldoftrash.libsyn.com or iTunes or iHeartRadio. My name is Stevie, and I'll see you all later.